All right, everyone. Welcome to this Twirl Talk Tuesday. And good news, we have power this week, and we should be golden for what to do. And this week is a continuation of what we started last week. And last week was about expanding our reach and recognizing and talking about the difficulties of being in a sport that is mainly a white female sport, and how we do better and open the doors to a broader audience. So because the conversation was so good last week, and so important, it was important to me that we continue this week. And this week is about a call to action. So it's not just recognizing the issues and the problems, but it's about how to do things better. So the panelists this week, I get excited every week, so I'm sorry if I sound like a broken record, but I get so excited to do this because I just think that we get to talk about things that we would not normally sit down and talk about. And so I want to present to you tonight the people that are able to be on this call with us. So I'm going to start from my screen from left to right, and we are going to go ahead tonight, and I'd like to start introducing with John Mitchell. So John, if you would like to give us your brief rundown of your credentials and where you come to us from.
Sure. So first of all, thank you for asking me and inviting me to the conversation tonight. I'm really excited, and I've been looking forward to this since we connected last week. So once again, my name is John Mitchell. They call me John Baton, and I originate from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And I'm currently living in Las Vegas, Nevada, where it's extremely hot right now. And some of my credentials are that I was the first African-American male feature twirler for Penn State University. And I am also currently an NBTA judge and coach. And then my claim to fame and my kind of God purpose for work is that I am the president and the founder of Twirling to Fight Cancer, which is a nonprofit that has breast cancer awareness within the sport of baton twirling.
Well, it's been wonderful to see the work that you have done there, and you've made a great presence with it and really answered an unanswered call onto some things there and providing a great purpose. I know our university, does the head, does the ribbons in their hair. Yeah, yeah. So it's been great awareness. So thank you for that work. Next up is Taylor Bolds. And so I have just been introduced to Taylor Bolds through Olivia Lynch, who was a panelist last week, then through the paper that she has done. So Olivia, would you like to give us a little bit of your background? Excuse me, Taylor, give us a little bit of your background.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm Taylor Bolds. I originated from Canton, Ohio. I'm currently living in North Carolina, and I work as a social worker, family counselor. I was in the twirling world for about 20 years. I retired, I guess, 2 years ago after coming off an injury. I was the first Black Miss Major of America, Black featured Ole Miss, first Black feature in the SEC, all thanks to John, one of my coaches. So good to see John again. So yeah, that's just a little bit about me.
Wonderful. The next person I want to introduce you to, again, I've just had the fortunate meeting virtually, and comes from rave reviews from one of my teammates, partners on a projects that we're working on, Jen Marcus, and it's Tanya Jackson. So I'm delighted to have Tanya tonight. Go ahead, Tanya, give us your intro and background.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Tanya Jackson, and I live in a city called Pembroke Pines, Florida. But I teach in Miami, Florida, in a very rough part of town. However, the program started out of a need for, I believe, to get diversity, in this area of baton twirling. I was a majorette at a school called Miami Northwestern Senior High School, and am now the current coach there. Along with that, I'm also the coach for the Jules Twirling Academy, as well as the director of Camp Kanya Auxiliary Camp, that also teaches not only baton twirling, but dance and winter guard. I'm a Florida Bandmaster Association adjudicator, so I judge for the high school bands in the state of Florida.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And then finally, to make us all North American tonight is Leisha Strawn. And I've known Leisha since she was a child in twirling and have been able to watch her grow up and become an outstanding Canadian coach. And I'm just excited to still have the connection and excited to have her on the call. So Leisha, could you give us a little bit about your background, please?
Sure. Thank you so much for asking me. I'm so honored to be with you and all the panelists. My name is Leisha Strawn. I'm based in Winnipeg, Canada, and I've been involved with baton since I was 5 here in Canada. So I know our context will be quite different because I know we don't have the same structure in terms of baton twirling in high school at all here in Canada or universities at all here in Canada. So it's a little different, but I was able to compete for many years on our national team in the Canadian Baton Twirling Federation and as part of the World Baton Twirling Federation. And I was a grand national champion here, as well as a world finalist in freestyle. And I have a couple medals from Worlds from the pairs event over the years. And yeah, I'm a master's judge, M5 judge with WBTF, and judge here in Canada, as well as coach. I've been coaching for over 25 years. So, so hopefully I have some things, but I know the context is quite a bit different here in Canada as well.
Well, thank you so much. And I think that it's to have this group of panelists tonight, it's not just about twirling, it's that most of you have taken it to a different level with your career or with what you're doing with twirling from a specific viewpoint that you come at it at. So what I would like to do tonight is be able to take the discussion and make it so that we can walk away from here tonight and go, I can do that. I can make a difference making a change in this way or that way. So one of the first things that I would like to ask you tonight is, from your own experience in twirling, what would you like to see different? So John, let me start with you. What would you like to see different from your own experience?
I think the first thing that I would have to say, that to be honest with you, I did not even realize this until I started thinking about knowing that you had asked me to do the panel. And one of the things that I would like to see different and that I wish would have happened before me was that I've never been judged by an African-American female ever in the like never in the sport. And to say it's female dominated, it's kind of, you know, crazy that I've never had an African-American woman behind the table. I've definitely had some African-American men judge me, but I've never had that woman. So that's one of the things. I would like the, I guess, outreach to happen that recruits more women of color, and specifically African-American women, to come back to the sport and become judges. And so that would be one of the things. And then the other thing would be the image. I would like the image to be celebrated. The Black culture, in some ways, to be celebrated from its fullness, not just maybe from a slavery piece or a hip hop place, but for its fullest. Lindy Hop, I mean, there's so many different genres that, you know, reflect our culture that I really would love that that would be more celebrated and be able to be just even more appreciated. And so those would be two of the things that I would come off the top of my head with. That I would, and then of course the male part. You know, you always have to just know that the male portion of that has a huge significant piece in obviously my experience, but understanding how we can be more, less pageantry perhaps, and combine the sport of it all and market that differently so that it appears and attracts more boy twirlers and their fathers, and letting their boys twirl. I think that's a huge part of what we can have a conversation about too, is in the move forward, and just how that pageantry piece of baton twirling mixed with the sport really shadows where the diversity of men even in the sport don't happen as much.
Right. No, I totally understand. And this is a very personal side to what I have to offer, but anyone who knows me knows my struggle with the pageant side of things. And over the last couple of weeks, I've really heard reference, especially with the African-American girls, talking about their hair and like the need to fit some mold. And it's like, but why is that even a discussion? Why is that a part of our sport? That if you're Serena Williams playing tennis, you're not worried about how your hair is going to be. So yeah, I mean, that's another whole topic, and I do have my own views on that. So Taylor, if I were to ask you the same thing, don't forget to, there we, I can handle that. So Taylor, same question. If you were to see anything different, what would it be?
I think there's a huge issue of colorism in our sports. The twirlers in the advanced community are very much looking like myself, either light skin, white passing. And Olivia, I hope she doesn't mind me bringing her up, but she was a huge reference to my thesis because we have this trope that Black women are these strong beings, and everyone always said Olivia was such a strong powerhouse, and it never really gave her the chance to do femininity the way that the twirling world expects. So then there was a huge, discrepancy of seeing darker skinned Black women who were just as talented, and don't, not to get Olivia wrong, she's an amazing twirler, but I still wouldn't consider her this like powerhouse. I mean, she was doing everything the exact same that we were. However, when you codify darker skinned Black women as like these strong, powerful beings, then the pageant aspect is ending up looking the same year after year after year. The Black women are able to straighten their hair or have the same body type. So there was this lack of just these powerful twirlers even having access within the advanced division, let alone within the sport in general.
Okay, no, that's wonderful to hear. So Tanya, in what you're doing, and we'll bring that out a little bit further as far as the group and recreation, because I think you have such valuable information for people. In what you offer the young women that you have in your groups, is there anything that you have to filter the information to make it more attractive? Or do you think that you are offering something that the rest of the world should figure out?
Well, I think it's been a challenge for me in a couple ways. I talked to my daughter today to discuss, what we were doing. Did we really look at it from a racial perspective? And how did we come to the point where we blended this product so that it was, amicable to everyone? And when I hear what we should do, or is there anything we should do differently, I look back and say, from a judge's perspective, having been aware of what was presented before me outside of my own culture, it might be good culturally for everybody to start understanding different realms of what beauty is and what the definition from our perspective that might be. But in terms of what we do, I think it's deep. We have a more than a call to twirl. It is to bring our students where we bring them on sometimes the national floor. We have to address other things. We have to address, and I listened to the panel last week. I heard it this today. We have to address the economics of things. We have to address a lack of guidance. We have to address grandparents raising children. So before we even get to the floor, we have a whole, set of other things that we have to do before we even get there. And then when we get there, we have to make sure that we're presenting them with something that they feel confident that they can do. And I asked my daughter today, I said, did we ever really discuss this? Did we ever bring this up as an issue? She said, no, mommy, you really didn't. I just said, I prayed, and everybody that knows me knows I'm a, powerful praying person. So I just asked God to allow fairness to take place. And I think that that's what happened. I think that where we won, we fairly won. And anytime we didn't, we examined our score sheets and we said, well, we'll do better next time. I don't know that we had big, issues in terms of that.
Okay. And when you look at so I think about it from the sense of freestyle and rhythmic. that when you're trained to judge in freestyle and rhythmic, that I may not appreciate some certain style, but I can judge it fairly. So it may not be something I would choose to do. So I feel like there might be some exposure that like, so maybe I don't dress in, so say I don't dress in black and white. That doesn't mean that when someone wears a great black and white outfit, I can't go, that is amazing. So I think it's a sense of appreciation and expanding the cultural reach to say, this may not be what you do, but from a sense of assessment and judgment, giving a score, can't you appreciate the technique, the excellence, the style with which they've chosen to go? And maybe that needs to be a bigger point of discussion.
At the Florida Bandmaster Association level, what we have done in terms of inviting diversity is through we can't just become a judge forever. We have to be recertified. And to recertify, certain things happen. You know, it addresses certain trends, certain changes, certain innovation. So from one certification point to the next, you may have to encounter what's going on, you know, in the world, what's going on with the music that you're going to be faced with, what's going on with your interpretation of that, and do you know what you're looking at? Do you know what you're evaluating? And is it quality? And from that genre, if you listen to different pieces of music and not just what you like, and outside of your culture, you'll come away with, I guess, a way to innovate and not stay the way we are. And I think that the recertification process could help all of the twirling organizations, because it makes you come up to speed with the culture and makes you understand what the kids are doing, what they like. You have brand new coaches with new, you know, and new generations. So we think differently, we do things a little differently, and not just from a racial perspective, but from a cultural perspective.
The sheer exposure. Yeah. And I think that like this weekend, we have 16 to 20 hours of WBTF recertification. So I appreciate continuing education. So Leisha, up in Canada, you have a whole different realm. And so what would you say to us as far as how Canada is doing, what we can learn from their mistakes versus how we grow from how to make the diversity in Canada and the US grow?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, you know, where I think the US is a little bit ahead of us is in terms of access to supplies, in terms of tights that, you know, match the skin color, in terms of shoes that match the skin color of the athlete. I know you had conversations about that last week, about the importance of that, and the importance of building confidence in kids and having them actually have tights and shoes that match their complexion is part of that, and that's very important. But the other thing which I'm hearing from John and hearing across the board is this idea of representation. Like, we do not have enough representation in our sport of people of color for a lot of different reasons. And I mean, I'm in Canada, where there's, I mean, over my 25 years of coaching, I've coached, I can count on one hand how many kids have been of color. I normally have white athletes who I'm coaching. And in terms of high level coaches in our country, again, we only have myself and a couple other coaches who are Black coaches. So so for us, I think, you know, having kids that look like them, having athletes, coaches, officials who look like you, I think is really important. I think this can be done at the national level. I think this also can be something that's talked about in terms of WBTF. I think that's also, we're lacking representation at the world level, and hopefully as we go into the IBTF amalgamations, that's something that we can keep in touch. But you know, as a quick story, I remember myself starting to compete at world championships and not seeing anyone that looked like me as an athlete at all at the world level. And it wasn't really until I think the fourth time that I went to world championships where I finally saw one other athlete from England. I was a senior at the time, she was a junior. And it was like, we saw each other across the room and immediately like found each other. It was like, oh my gosh, like where did you come from? And we were so excited to see each other. And from that moment up till today, up till this morning actually, we've been good friends and in contact with each other. And I think it's just because either of us didn't have many other Black athletes, particularly at the world level. So I think it's trying to develop more countries that are of color. And we used to have a South African country in the World Baton Twirling Federation. I'm not sure what happened, but I think it's really important that, you know, that would have been a really important thing. Those athletes started coming to some ICs and to some worlds, and we saw these groups of Black athletes, and that was so exciting for me as a coach and as a judge in the sport. And I know we have lots of some Caribbean, French-speaking Caribbean islands that are now starting. And I think we really have to try to support, these countries to bring the level of diversity up a lot higher, and then encourage more judges, more coaches of color. I think that's a really important key.
Well, and I think it's the little things too, in that I remember in South Africa came and remember when they went to the wrong end of Canada. And, you know, so a church helped them out and got them where they needed to be. And they had curtain rods to twirl with. They didn't even have batons. So here's Starline. Starline stepped up and got batons for them. But I also remember being asked to go coach there. And it was like 6 weeks out on a dirt road. And there's a part of me that's like, oh my gosh, you know, I have 2 young kids at the time. Could I go do it? And so it's us being willing to make an investment. So that
Absolutely
leads to the next thing. And so, John, what are the hurdles that you see that need to be overcome that we could really speak about and address?
So I think that one of the main hurdles are that when the opportunity happens, more from, I'm going to say, back to the judging portion of that, and or the coaching and bringing your team to a competition, and you are a person of color, that as the majority of our community, and being the white women, there's sometimes a bit of, it's such a sorority and it's such a hierarchy within this sorority, especially with MBTA. And so Miss Majorette is the epitome, and then Grand Nationals is also important. But once you've achieved those, you're in the group. And then if you're an advanced twirler, you're in the group. And other than that, you kind of aren't in the group. And when I say that, it's just the conversations that happen in regard to people's qualifications. Oh, well, she was only an intermediate twirler. Oh, well, you know, she really she won beginner Miss Majorette, and then she quit. Now she came back, and she's like, there's always that qualifier of the resume that I think happens across the board. But then it gets a bit more challenge than when it's the Black woman that comes back and she has her team. And then if her team's doing Beyonce, and then if she wasn't an advanced twirler, do you know what I mean? All of that then starts to be a conversation, or even not a conversation. It's the energy that gets delivered that you kind of feel that vibe. It's just you're not in. And I don't know if that makes sense, but I know that I've experienced it from just conversations, with it being an attempt of an innocent conversation, but it was still qualifying that person to not fully be in the top level.
All right.
And if that makes sense, I mean, I think that's one of the things that doesn't make people want to come back, because they just feel like there's such a judgment around where they're coming from and what they did in the sport. Some justified, but a lot of times not fully justified, because we really could be losing some great people. They just didn't maybe twirl to the highest level, but that doesn't mean they can't coach or judge to the highest level.
Well, I think that's one of the main things that I have really been talking about lately, is that we've got to find a way to find twirling to be, you can have a blast and you can be fabulous, whether you are spending all of this money and doing all of these events or not. You know, my daughter was a competitive gymnast and she went to level 8. She was never going to see a world championships, but still, or national championships, but still had an amazing experience for the level she was at and still walked away from it. So I think that that's why this discussion is valuable, because we need to make it worthy
And-
for everyone.
And if I can just add, and the one thing that we can't forget that's unique about our sport is that the one thing that we have unique, and not that other sports don't do it, but we have a uniqueness that we are so generational.
Mhm.
And so most of the time, it's mom did it, grandma did it, or auntie did it, or my aunt or my cousin did it. It's
Mhm.
normally not just, I just saw baton twirling. And
Mhm.
so from that generation is another reason on why it becomes so, I'm going to say the word again, sorority-ish, and there's a better word, I'm sure, but just, getting
No,
people
but
to
I
understand.
get it.
Okay, and so it just becomes that kind of vibe, because if your mom did it, she's able to introduce you to all the people that did it with her.
I guess.
That then
Isn't that
makes
also,
it,
isn't
say
that
that
also
again?
tough? I'm sorry, John. Isn't that also tough in that if you're a white grandma that had a white daughter that has a white daughter, then, that's continuing too. So Taylor, what do you think are the hurdles? You work in social work. You're probably looking at the greater picture all the time. What are the hurdles to you to opening the door to expanding our reach?
Obviously, lack of access. It's not just financial, it's, emotional labor. If you don't have the time, or your mom can't drop you off at practice, or your mom can't, assist you with costumes or anything like that, then you're sort of left in the wayside and sort of in those younger divisions. But also, obviously, a bigger issue is the financial. Costumes are outrageous, and obviously they're gorgeous, but if you don't have the monies for that, people will talk about it, and it's not just unstated. They'll write it on your score sheet and then you deduct points, and it becomes this thing that everyone just looks at you and it's like, oh man, that's a hand-me-down costume, instead of, oh, she could afford to get her own. But also, I think it's an issue of the time twirling needs to decide if it wants to be judged on pageantry or actual twirling, because we put this emphasis on the fact that we're such great twirlers. However, Miss Majorette of America is the big event that everyone looks forward to. And if you don't do what they want, whether that's stated on the score sheet or if judges don't like you, then you're not going to succeed. You're never going to make it to the top 10. You're never going to make it to, the sisterhood of winning America. And with that being said, if you have a judge that doesn't like you, then you're not gonna place well either. I've had times where I've walked up to the line. It's just been very disheartening to see someone that I know doesn't like me, and I could do the best routine in the world, and I still don't do well. So there needs to be some diversity in judges. Stop having the same people judge everyone over and over and over. Because
Okay.
if you want these younger people to be in the sport long term, especially Black twirlers, you can't have the same people deciding who does pageantry correctly.
Okay. I really appreciate that input. And I have my own feelings on that, and I want to be able to open it up for the discussion, because we do tend to go in two different ways as organizations. So we need to talk about how to open it for everyone. So Tanya, in what ways, if there is a way, would you like to see the twirling organizations change?
I think that there is, again, some sensitivity that needs to happen in terms of I think John put it earlier as the different genres that exist outside of what may seem to be a lot already, but in terms of diversity, even in a non-white world, there is so much more in terms of style, in terms of appreciation of the cultural things that can occur in an environment that is non-white, that those things can be explored. Last week, you guys talked about body type, just to reevaluate what those things are in terms of what body types should look like. skin tones. So we have a place where we know where to go get, and there's so many terms that people often today say black and brown people. Do you know how many color browns in brown? Like, we have shades and shades of brown. So the comment sheet that states your line should look one way, it would look that way, it's starting to, if we had the opportunity for those 8 shades of brown shoes to match the 8 shades of brown tights that we need. And it's difficult to, and so in terms of changing those things, we have to yell. Somebody's been yelling because it's been changing. So now we see mocha, now we see deep chocolate, and now we see other shades that fit all of our different brown shades. But just from showing up, in a costume, it needs to look that way. We found brown mesh, several shades of it. So when we get costumes made, we don't have to dye it. They're getting it now. So those are some things I think should change. And maybe some of us should go around and I wouldn't say duplicate the jewels system, because it's high minority achievement. It's expensive to duplicate. It is expensive to, it's been expensive for me to first, I just want to say this, that I'm different in a way, because our team, our first thing is fun. Our last thing is fun. And everything we do, we want to have fun. So that's what I believe children need, period. As a parent, as a coach, I believe they need great experiences. I think it's too much weight on your shoulders, whether you're black or white, to have the pressure on you to, and all of this stuff, some of this stuff is just messy. It has nothing to do with race. It's just, a messy way that needs to be straightened up systematically, one thing at a time. And I think that's too much to wait. So when the jewels have won or something, we're ecstatic, but we really did come to have fun. And the parents really did come to enjoy the town. I mean, they're there dealing with the competition, and the daddy is looking up in the air like, when is this going to be over? But in terms of that, it really does need to have some fun going on. I have liked when, the award ceremonies happen and we can have some fun. I think that that's all that really matters, is that the child perceives that they are having fun. And when they look and the judge is smiling, whether the judge is black or white, but they're agreeing with the type of music we chose and they understand. And I have to say this in terms of the jewels, we're not married to a particular organization, but we go wherever we can get some, where the parents say, oh, I like that town. That's just how we pick it, and I'm being honest. So when we first went to AYLP, and this was the first time I allowed them to dance, because let me back up and talk about this just for a minute. There are some things in terms of the demographic that I work with that Black people have to address that only Black people are going to be able to address. And so one of those things is the way Black women are perceived through something, and I don't know if everybody heard of this term called twerking. So that is something I don't stand for and has to be, in my mind, corrected and addressed. I have my sponsor joining us tonight who put that in my mind, that we have to show up a certain way to be taken seriously. So my girls, they have to know when you come to the parent meeting, this is not the twerking organization. So with that being said, that does not mean that when I play the music they're gonna twirl to, that I don't wanna see the judge feeling it, you understand? Because there's a certain way that in terms of my team or teams that I would like to see, form and develop, there's gonna have to be a meeting in the middle of what we call the standard, or, and what our culture likes to hear and interpret in terms of music. So in the large part of things, a simple cultural class, and it's just not African Americans. We have Hispanic people twirling, you know, and other races twirling outside of being white, that we have to embrace and understand, you know, what that's all about.
Well, I think that, and I said this a couple weeks ago, that as a sport, regardless of organization, our competition are not other twirlers. Our competition for grabbing the interest are the other activities that provide fun, healthy nourishment of who that child is and what the future holds for them. So it's not going to be a national championship or world championship, but if it's a healthy environment that the kid and the parent are having fun in, then we've caught them. So I think that it's a matter of, like, Tanya, what you're offering, you're grabbing people because of the experience. So do we as twirlers need to look at how we're able to expand that? So when we look at, why do kids go to soccer, and why do they go to cheer, and why do they go to gymnastics? You know, I've seen more deadly gymnastic coaches in my time, but they open a gym and people go. So how do we make it so you get a twirling program and people go? So Leisha, let me step away just a second, Tanya. Leisha, is that an opportunity at all in Canada? Are there national programs that you can expand to diversified and more and greater socioeconomic demographics?
That's great. It's so interesting listening, because I have grown up interesting listening to Taylor, because I've grown up in Canadian Baton Twirling Federation, where I never did a pageant ever once in my whole baton career. So it's so like interesting because that's not a part of the sport that we ever did. It is really just twirling here. So I think in terms of diversity, and I'm kind of thinking about, that was a really interesting question, thinking about baton twirling. I think one thing baton really has going for it is that we are a really great entry-level sport. You know, you don't need a lot to start twirling. You can, you know, if you wanted to loan batons to kids, they don't have to buy batons. If you have old batons, you can borrow. Like, it is a really nice sport to grab people's attention. And it did me. You know, I'm not a generational twirler. I'm someone who was supposed to be in tap dancing, and the next table beside registration happened to be baton. And I saw somebody just twirling it in their fingers, and I thought, well, that's interesting. What's that? You know? And my mom just put me in. So I never saw a competition. I never saw anything before I started. So I think there's something with that imagination that we capture young boys and girls with. I think where we lack is exactly what all the panelists are talking about in terms of access and socioeconomic status. And that was talked about in the last Twirl talk as well. I think we have to go to communities because we are mobile. You know, we can bring a baton case and some music, and we can like teach in communities pretty easily that way. I think, and here in Canada, because we don't have as much diversity, I think we as coaches need to go to where there is more diversity and really capture the imaginations of those kids, because they might not be able to go to where we are. And the other thing I was thinking about lately is here in Winnipeg, we have a pretty prestigious ballet school called the Royal Winnipeg Ballet. And I want to say after the National Ballet in Canada, it's probably the next highest one. And the general school, you know, for the recreational program, they offer incentives for boys. So because we don't have a lot of boys who want to dance. So they have, so if you want to take, for example, ballet or jazz, it's about 70% less for a boy to take the exact same ballet class as it is for a girl, because they want to bring boys in. I don't know why we can't do that for people of color at all. You know, I think here, at least in Canada where we are, I think we can make it accessible for families, people of color. If we want more diversity, then I think we have to make some pretty big changes to bring in more diverse kids and to make it affordable. You know, we know once you get to a certain level, obviously there's costs, and I'm absolutely on the costume debate with you guys for sure. My athletes laugh at me because they always ask me, well, what costume should I wear? And I was like, what about your black bodysuit and tights? Yeah. Like, I don't care about costumes at all. Like, I really just leave it up to them. So I think if everybody just twirled the black bodysuit, I would be like happy as a clown. But I know that's not going to happen that way. But it absolutely should not be a factor at all. There should not be any mention of costume on a score sheet. I just don't think there's a reason
Yeah,
to.
and that's pretty much an MBTA thing, right?
Yes, yeah, exactly. Well, we
Spreadsheet,
see it here in
right?
CBTF
Yeah.
as well. We definitely see it in CBTF as well.
Yeah, and
So,
yeah, you can see that it matters, you know, as some people talk about it.
Yeah, but anyways, that's I think trying to attract people, I think we have to think of creative ways, and I think providing incentives or making it less for people of color, considering there's been systemic racism all this time, and you know, I think there's a way to even out that balance. I think that's one way I'm gonna definitely be thinking about it differently, I think, as I go into the next season.
Well, I think what I'm learning as we go along here is the need to be so much more intentional, that what you said about going to them, that at least in my experience and what I know, so many coaches just kind of like wait, and whoever comes to them, instead of making it a concerted effort and to be very intentional about who you're going for and who you're seeking in your demographic.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
I mean, this is just like last week, and that we could go on for hours. And I want to open it to the gallery because there's so many more things that we could talk about. And I don't want to monopolize the conversation because I'm sure people have questions for you. Your information is just so valuable. So gallery, it's open to you now, and I can see all of you. So if you want to raise your hand, if you want to ask a question, certainly let me know who you want to ask it to, or we'll open it to the general panel. But there's some really eye-opening things when we just talk about it. Let's just talk about it and see what we can do better and how we make our programs more intentional and more open to the broader base of people. And to reiterate something I said last week, that you have to plant so many seeds sometimes to get that one amazing flower, that unless you throw the seeds out and plant so many, you're not going to find those gems out there. So we just need to find a way to do that. First of all, for the growth and health of our sport, for the diversity of it. And I think just from a general health and wellness check, like, why do we want to see only white people? Why does it have to be that when the jewels come, it's something we have to think about? Why do we have to think about when a Taylor twirls in finals that it's a factor? That drives me insane. I mean, why is that a thing? So I think we have to find a way to get past that. So does anybody have a question? Marshall, did I see your hand up? Go ahead and unmute.
Can you hear me? I was having some issues earlier. Okay, sorry, I missed the beginning portion of this because of those issues, so this may have been answered. But mine is specifically directed to John, who he already knows that I adore him because he set standards and broke barriers in my home area of Pennsylvania. So I almost went to PSU and was asked to audition for twirling as a feature twirler, but I want to ask him, what piece of advice does he have for me or any parent that may be in a mixed, that may be mixed, because clearly I'm iridescent and William is not. William is of color. What information can you provide to me to help him as a male person of color in our sport?
And that happens to be biracial, or are you saying that is black, 100% black? Are you saying
100% black?
Oh, okay. So the one thing that was done for me is that I still needed to see role models. So I think that the investment that you give your students is going to be the most important. They're going to know that, and it won't matter about color. They're just going to know your heart and that you're invested in them. But the way that you can go one step or two steps further is to say, although I'm invested in you, I know you need to see others that look like you in order to hear their stories, so you know how to get through and get to the top. Once again, even if they're not ever getting to the top, it's your mindset as the coach setting that we're going to get you to the top. And some of that's creating that village that you do with, and what I think that the sport does with any girl or boy. It's just, it needs to look a bit different with the African American twirler, because when they go every single week, or every single month to the competitions, they're just not seeing themselves, and they may not be speaking it out loud, but it's still something that they're noticing. And if they're not noticing it, their parents are noticing it. So as the coach, you're able to potentially open that door to the community that has existed called other twirlers, and meaning twirlers of color. And so having those people around your students creates a motivation, creates a different mouthpiece, creates different words that are coming out. I see your face. Go ahead. Ask me some. There's a follow-up. Go ahead.
Yes, because I am not Williams' coach by choice. I function as the parent. We practice together. Our coach is Dale Thomas. So for a parenting perspective.
Okay. From the parent perspective. Yes. Sorry. Okay. So then from the parent perspective, you're the parent. You're our boss as a coach. So being that you're paying the paycheck, there is nothing wrong for you to ask and say, be clear that I'm comfortable with you being his head coach or his primary coach. But in order for him to be a full, well-rounded champion, he needs to see others that look like him also. And so, let's say just add so it's not about me going to John and having John make him his main coach. It's about, I need you two to collaborate to figure out how you're going to make this holistic champion, this holistic twirler that has to do with his race. And I think that's one of the main things we can leave with from tonight is the twirling world has to be okay, that it's okay that we talk about race. It doesn't mean that we're going to then leave and say, oh, she's so, racist and prejudiced. No, it just may mean, wow, we had a good conversation, and it's going to make us be that much more stronger and better as a twirling community. So as a parent, it absolutely to me is your responsibility and your right to say, I need a whole picture here, and how do we make that happen? And maybe that's where you throw a little bit of the power back to the coach, that you ask, how do we make that happen? What do you suggest? Who do you know that looks like my son? And then let them kind of do that work since you are paying them. And then if they can't do that, you may have to find a different coach. But I know whose hands you're in, and you're in good hands. So he's an incredible guy.
Thank you, guys. It felt a little bit like after this discussion last week that until this point in time, we've all just existed. And some of the hard topics had not been brought up. Some of the questions had not been asked. And so now the door is open to say those things, because until this point in time, it felt like everybody wanted every twirler to just fit in the mold. And maybe it's the door's open to not. Leisha, what's your input on that?
I'm just saying, I'm just piggybacking on something John said that just struck a chord in terms of having role models. And Marshall, I think it's really important that not only in-person role models, but if that's not a possibility, search online, find videos on YouTube, find things that you can watch in terms of, how the male body, Black body moves, and understanding that. I also think going a little bit even outside of baton, I don't think all the examples even have to be in our sport. There's so many great websites out there just looking at Black boy magic dancers, you know what I mean? And looking
I do follow that one because my background is from dance.
Perfect. Yeah. I mean,
yes.
And anytime you can follow, some great young Black, male dancers. And if they're not something artistic, even if it's a swimmer, a Black swimmer, there are not a lot of Black swimmers, right? A lot of people, even swimmers, who feel like they are by themselves and alone, right? So following some of those, finding their stories, reading those stories. There's a great website called the Players Tribune. It follows, it's actually developed by Derek Jeter, and he uses it as a platform to tell the stories of athletes from a lot of different sports and things that they've gone through and their own stories. And there's some just great stories from a variety of sports, but that I like to read to my own athletes, and so that they know they're not alone. Like, you're not the first one to go through this. You won't be the last one, but there's a way, there's something that we can learn from everyone's experience. Even getting on a Skype call with John, just to have your son talk to him, you know what I mean? And be like, hey, how was,
John sends videos, and I do show him the videos, which has been very inspirational. So, I mean,
awesome.
I can't thank you enough for that one.
There's Emery's out there too. I'm sure Emery be happy.
Emery is
Make a video.
an hour south of me, so I see him every now and then at. Does everybody here know Emery? You're in Canada.
So Leisha,
Well, Emery was the only next black twirler I saw. So I was like, at Worlds, I was like, oh my gosh, a black male twirler at WBTF Worlds, like first time. So we immediately became friends. Yeah.
But you did touch on what my biggest fear as a parent is, and that is him feeling this loneliness that I can't address because I won't feel that. Because when I was competing, I was with Sean Wimberly and Bobby Tholinger. I won't understand what it was like to be the only person, totally different color in a room, and to feel that weakness, and that because I can't troubleshoot that as a parent. I'm looking for any way to support. So thank you for the feedback.
One thing that you just brought up, Leisha, I think is a great comment, is also when we're looking at performance examples in every event, then our judges committees need to look at examples that are of diverse backgrounds. Let's not just look at every white girl in those role models. Let's not just look at the world champion men. Let's look at every example. And so when I'm trying to think back to testing, and how many all black teams have we ever seen that are in a performance example, and from all of those scoring examples. So Tanya, let me go to you a second till someone's hand comes up. Do you use a national program, or is there an example? Did you just find your way? Or as we look to rounding out this discussion and someone wants to create a program, how did you find your way?
Well, my daughter, we moved to a predominantly white neighborhood, and I'm going to try to go fast. And she had a few self-esteem problems. So we came home, and you know, our hair, can you see my hair? It's a little different. So she did something called permed her hair. And for Black people, that means making it straight. And I was appalled. I was like, what did you do? So she found some perm mix, permed her hair. And we had a long discussion about her not feeling that she was looking like the other people. And so we had, we dealt with it. And I knew I had to address her esteem issues. So at the very same time, I was judging somewhere, and they called my name. A young lady by the name of Miss Wendy of the Florida Superstars, her parent was in the audience. And when she asked Wendy, do you know this lady, Tanya Jackson? She's a judge, blah, blah, blah. She lives in Pembroke Pines. That's what the people said over the PA. So she called me and introduced herself to me, asked me for questions, and asked me to judge. So when I went to judge the competition, I had never been to a only baton twirling competition. I was like, are you kidding me? This exists. I had no idea. I was a majorette in high school. I did fairly well for our style and our way, but I had never seen competing twirlers. So at the very point, I said, well, she needs this. This is, the neighborhood for it. We went to church in a school called Flanagan, and I recruited 5 young ladies from church and said, well, I don't know all the categories, but I do feel like we could march. Like I could figure out how to make up a marching routine, and I could take them to a little competition, and they could do okay. Well, I took them to Twirl Mania, like a crazy woman. And I was like, oh, Jesus, what have I done? So we wind up, I got Joyce on the phone to ask her a few questions. I didn't know who Joyce was. I just called the number, and she happened to answer the phone. And so when I got there, I was a little intimidated, but I was also motivated because I was like, well, we're here. Let's go ahead and do it. They won second place in the category. That means that they got called on the stage with the Twirl Maniac and got down there in front of everybody.
And might I add, it was awesome. Hi, Mom.
Hey, Princess. So their first experience was that. So it was no going backwards. So we then decided that we would put an ad in the paper. And what did we do that for? So in our area, they took to it, they bit. And many people had majorette moms or cousins. And I was like, this is a little different, guys. This isn't what we do. It's a little different. And who else but I think it was Samantha Johnson. When they got off the floor, they thought they were terrible. And I was almost agreeing with them. I was like, okay, it's over. Let's just go home. So one of the girls started crying. And Samantha, you know her pedigree. She's a great twirler. She came and she just comforted her out of her heart. And she said, oh, don't feel bad. Where are you from? And we were like, Miami. She said, so am I. We connected. So from one thing led to the other. And so I said, okay, that was that. Let's try to do it again, and let's try to look at the paper and see what we need to do to correct ourselves. And maybe we can get in another category. Long story short, we met Melissa Marcus, who became Princess's personal coach. And so we call Princess a center jewel, where she was on the synergy team because I paid for her to have lessons with Melissa, but she was also on the Jewels team. So we kind of borrowed from Princess's experience that I paid for personally and added to the Jewel experience, which caused them to become competitive. So with that, so many people came and offered themselves to us. When we would show up, they said, wow, that's like 30 girls on the floor. Jeannie Schwallet came to me and tapped me on the shoulder and said, you need to do a show corps. So I said, a show corps, wow. So we did Coming to America. You know, we did everything that we felt they would like, but also that met the guidelines of a standard for what a show corps, you know, would be. When we had a girl who was 11 years old, she's now 6'2", but when she was 11, she was 6 feet tall. We said, girl, you got a model. You have the body. So from organically, we made our way, but everybody loved on us. Everybody came to us and gave us pointers. And so what I do want to say before we leave, in terms of a call to action, which is what I can take from your email. Princess and I spoke about this earlier. We're willing to go in whatever neighborhood you need to go into, because we did it. We already have a system. We know what it takes. We know how to get into a school through an after school care program. We know how to recruit coaches. We know how to pay them too, because we understand the rate. So we've been able to, through grant writing and begging, get a way to have the best coaches come to our programs and teach, to evaluate the students on what we believe their strong suit is, put them in those categories, choreograph the routine, and go for it. So we're willing to go to whatever city that wants to have us and show you how we were able to cause minority students to be able to afford to travel, to buy costumes, to look like you want to look. But we don't wear the long pieces. We wear Afro puffs when we need to, and we are ourselves. Right. So you don't want to move them to a place where they're not their natural natural self. So that is my.
I love it. I love it. My heart is so warmed. And what I'm taking from this conversation is that most of us are in twirling forever, regardless of the difficulties or anything, because of the connections we have. And what I hear from everyone is the effort for collaboration and needed collaboration. And when you look at how you succeeded, Tanya, because of people that reached out to you and you being resourceful, imagine if each of us reached out to the next group and we gave that hand up, or we just researched an area we weren't familiar with, that I think that there is nowhere to go but up with it. That it's just not staying in your silo.
Oh, there she is.
It's not staying in your silo.
You want to watch with me?
No,
thank you.
Not staying in your silo and being able to do something a little bit different with it. So oh, Michelle, you had a question.
A lot of time being raised by my grandparents. I did. I was saying that I really think that the access is kind of one of the key things that we could work on. And so my question was for Taylor is with your social work, what ideas do you have for us? Because I agree that we're going to have to travel to some other places. When I was in my internship, there was an all-black parade corps that asked my mom to come and teach them, and there were like 30 to 50 black girls, and it was closer to where I was living, but I was in my internship and working over 80 hours and didn't really have the time to do it, but I came and helped out a couple times, and I think it was like an hour and 45 minutes of a drive for my mom one way to go and teach them. And I think she went like 6 or 7 times to help them. But so I think that we're going to have to go and do that. And that was great that there was already a group of girls together. But, you know, there's a lot of people like Alicia was saying that don't even know about Baton. So I think, you know, doing clinics in communities to bring attention to it and bring batons and, hey, this is what it's like, I feel like would be kind of a good way to build it. And I just, from your social work experience, how would you recommend, you know, getting those type of clinics started?
Well, it's interesting because I'm a family counselor, so I work with not only the individual, but the family, the school, sometimes the probation officers, the community. And a lot of the things that we always try to get these kiddos involved in is a pro-social. And just a lot of times there's not, because either it's, you know, something that costs a lot of money, a lot of travel. But if we were to take our time, go into the schools, you know, they have gyms, create these pro-social events already in these schools where, you know, girls might be wanting to get into majorette or cheerleading, but there isn't any teams around because I work in a very rural area right now. So I honestly couldn't tell you what the kids do here. I'm always trying to like outsource out because there's not anything in this area. Obviously, I can't do that as a social worker because, you know, confidentiality. But, you know, even in these alternative schools, I work with a lot of alternative schools where these kids, you know, are on probation and, you know, they're always like, what can we do? What can we have them keep their minds occupied? Bring in a teacher, you know, or have a Zoom meeting. You know, we don't have to bring in, you know, maybe John or Miss Tanya, but have a meeting to where they see what twirling is. Like Leisha was saying, all you got to do is hand them a baton. You know, the beginning access is cheap. It's staying in sport that's expensive. But, you know, an after-school program could be very easy. Talk to the principal, talk to the athletic director, anything like that.
Well, and I think it's making the move. It's now that we've got the call to action and we know we have to do better, we can't just let this go. We have to do better in so many ways, whether it's the way our judges are trained and the examples that they are seeing, whether it's encouraging people to become coaches and judges, or it's doing an after school program, or it's just generating the ideas, I think, and just nudging everyone in the right direction. The opportunity is there. It's so who's going to grab it and who's going to become the next Jules and who's going to become the next Canadian champion and who's going to become the next Penn State twirler. There's, so Leisha, go ahead.
Sorry, I just have to jump in on Taylor too. That's such a great point she made. And to just jump on her last point in terms of, you know, starting the after school programs and that, you know, they start, Baton can start really cheap. We don't need to progress them to competition. We can stay in badge program recreational the whole.
Oops, Leisha froze up a little bit here.
Well, yeah, and something to add, I actually
I have to get the competition. You know, we can do a lot in our Canadian Baton Twirling Federation. Sorry, we have our badge program. You know, and we can. There's a lot of clubs that just do badge program and have their kids feel a lot of confidence and a lot of competence through the badge program without going to a competition like at all for years if they don't want to, you know. So don't feel that pressure to have to like think, oh, when am I going to get into a competition? They don't need to. They can stay with the baton, shorts, t-shirt for a very, very long time. Yeah.
And just to go off of that, yeah, that would be perfect. So in Ohio, we had this big competition called Great Lakes, and it was one of our last qualifiers to nationals. And, it's in the heart of downtown Canton. And a lot of people would be like, oh my gosh, this is the ghetto. I had numerous people ask me if I was poor because I was from Canton. But recognizing, why don't you want to go to these areas? You're seeing that there's a competition here. You want to expand the sport, but why don't you want to invest in it? Like, not every Black person is going to rob you if you see them on the street. That doesn't happen. So just recognizing that bias and recognizing, why am I thinking that? Why am I saying that?
Right. And it's owning that bias. And I think a lot of people have started to understand what they haven't wanted to talk about. So before we finish this tonight, I want to ask each of our panelists that, as your twirling friend and colleague, John, what would you ask of me? That what can I do to help you as a Black man in the sport? And so me kind of like as a figure of the white woman in twirling.
So let's see, when I think about that, the one thing that comes immediately to my mind is, please do not stop talking. You have to continue to talk, in my opinion, because you have a different opportunity to help in the change, because you are still in the majority. And so the comfort that other white women are going to have with you is going to be different than what they have with me. And it's going to be have with a Black woman. And so although we can communicate and we can all get along extremely well and make things happen beyond belief, there's still a level of safety and comfort that we just have to acknowledge that that's not what's built into our society for white people to be able to feel comfortable to talk about race. We talk about it all day, every day, and have to live it. And it's different for the white experience because it's the majority, so you don't need to talk about it. But within this segment of our sport, you continuing to have the conversation and having and listening to ways in which other white women feel like they can make a difference and a change is where then the collaboration can continue to happen, and we really can knock it out of the park, because we need you all just like you need us in order to make the difference, to truly make it happen. So my thing would be, don't stop talking. And the last thing would be to be able to still know that you need to be around the table. So if we like to say a task force, the good old word task force, if we were to do a diversity task force, yes, there needs to be African-American people of color around it, potentially even leading it, but we can't have it be just us.
Right.
And so it needs to be that collaboration around the table that has the open heart and the open ear in order to then also make the change.
Okay. Thank you. It's heard.
Thank you. Thank
Taylor, asking you the same question. As a twirling friend, a new twirling friend and colleague, what do you need from me?
I think, Johnny he hit it on the head, having that conversation, but also you guys doing the education. Black culture does not begin with slavery. We're not just Black trauma, as John mentioned. We have culture, we have foods, we have so many things, and my culture is different than Tanya's, than Leisha's, than John's. Understand what colorism is, understand why judges seem to pick the same people over and over, and call out people. For Black people, it's exhausting to sometimes call out racism. Obviously, we will do so. However, a lot of times we're hoping that white people will be like, yeah, that wasn't a right thing that you should say, and we're not going to just let it slide anymore. So make white people uncomfortable. Ask them why they're talking about someone's hair. Why are you going to comment why are you making a comment on braids or, the fro? You don't need to. That's not your business. But don't be afraid to make white people uncomfortable about these conversations.
Oh my gosh, I love you so much. I love it. Okay, Tanya, what have you got for me? What if we're gonna walk away tomorrow and you're my brand new friend and I can be an ally in twirling, what can I do for you?
I just want everybody on this call, this panel, not only on this panel, but everybody watching and listening, to type in the chat box, Tanya, I am ready for my city, so that we could tell you what we did. And I just want to talk about the money one more time. Our twirlers don't have the money, but we did have ways that we did proposals where we have local, federal, and state grants to pay for coaches, to pay for costumes, to pay for batons, to pay for what I see it as an education in sports-based youth development. We have a ton of resources that not only if I know Black people have trouble paying, but white people too. I mean, I hear my white people sometimes telling me, dang, Miss Tanya, wow, how did you get to the Virgin Islands and Las Vegas and so and so? Oh, because we work. I sit at this computer and I type and I write and I make my case. So I've talked a lot, and I think it's a lot of talking that has been going on. So I'm ready to go to the next place and see if we can replicate what we did for anybody and anybody's team.
That's amazing. Well, you not only do it well, you do it with a giving heart. And I think to know that we're all in this together, and to know that you want to make it a better place and not just worry about just your jewels, it just speaks volumes. So I'm so thankful for that. All right, Leisha, my Canadian friend, what can I do for you?
Okay, I can just think of like 3 kind of quick things. The first thing is just remembering that, you know, the athletes that we have in our care, particularly as coaches, that the competitions aren't the things they remember. And, you know, they remember the experiences they have with each other. And they remember, you know, they remember what we say, everything that we say, except for when we're giving them technical corrections. They don't tend to remember them. But, because I always tell my athletes, I can give them I'm like, how do you remember a story from a competition from 2014? You don't remember about your free hand, like for the millionth time I've been telling you. But, so they remember those experiences. So it's really important, a really important time here when we're talking about systemic racism, we're talking about BIPOC people, Black, Indigenous people of color, that we really have to think about what we're saying and what we're sharing with them, and that we can have those conversations and that they will remember those. The next thing is this idea of social justice. I love what John's doing in terms of, you know, using the baton as a vehicle to help in terms of cancer. And I think that we have opportunities as coaches to do that. I know for my club, I'm in the 24th year of my club here in Winnipeg. And I think probably for the last 15 years, we've done our year in recital for a purpose. We don't charge tickets for our recital. We have them bring something for a cause. So, for example, we're doing something for Winnipeg Harvest, which is, you know, to help people with food. Then people will bring a can, something non-perishable as entry to the recital. And we have a lot of different examples of how we've done that. Now this Black Matters and the racism talk really gives me a platform too to talk to my athletes about what we want to support this year. And if there's something in terms of systemic racism and justice that we can do, that they can use in terms of their gifts and the talents and everything that they have as athletes, they can use that as a platform to help, then let's do that. You know, so we're going to try to do that for sure. And the last thing, again, is just this point that representation matters. If you're thinking, for example, of having a clinic, think of having a person of color part of that panel for your clinic. I was just in Australia in December as part of my research leave from the university, which is where I work. But while I was there, I did some teaching. And in 3 separate occasions, I had a couple small clubs have me come and do some, you know, 1-hour clinics. There was one child of color in each of those things that I went to. And every time at the end, when the parents came to take a picture of me with their child, they said, you are the very first person of color that they've been able to learn from. And she's like, I don't know if my child did anything. They probably just sat there and looked at you the whole time, because they really haven't seen anyone of color, anyone that's looked at them, looked at the way they look, involved in this sport for sometimes 6-7 years. And so, I just think the representation matters. Have clinicians of color. We have, particularly in the States. In Canada, I can give a little bit of, I know there's not a lot of us, but in the States, oh my gosh, there's so many to choose from. Locally, you know, and within, you've got to be able to find people of color who you can have as part of your panel, so that kids have somebody that looks like them. And if there's not anybody that looks like them, at least they know there's someone of color in this sport that, you know, I can learn from. And that's really important. So those are my 3 things.
Well, I am just so honored and humbled that this is such a rock star panel of human beings, that we are so, so lucky. So when I started putting this out there, and again, this is just my little Corona project. So 7-8 weeks ago, I had a free Tuesday night. Whoever has that, just let's start talking about twirling, and just started to bring up different topics. And then it got a little deeper. And so to be able to do this, what my disappointment would be that exactly what was said last week. Sometimes the people that need to be on this and listening are not here. So what I would challenge everyone on this call is that it will be posted later tonight at some point, and it's on my YouTube channel. This needs to be heard. This needs to be heard than just my little corner of whoever, my little 47 subscribers to my YouTube channel, or my however many people are seeing it on Facebook. That I would challenge each of you to take that recording and repost it, and just re-emphasize how important this discussion is. It's not just important to USTA or MBTA or TU or DMA. It's important to our children, and it's important to our futures. And you are so, so smart. I didn't have you here tonight because you're of color. Yes, that's what the topic is, but you are brilliant with what you're doing. And I just feel really lucky that you said yes to just Kyle doing this little thing on a Tuesday night. So there needs to be more of it, and we need to continue the discussion. And if I don't personally help with that, I want to be called out on it. So I just want to thank each of you tonight, and we will wrap this up in knowing that we are going to leave the world better than we found it. And we will make twirling be better than we found it. We must. And we have such an amazing, we're all in it for a reason. We're in it because we love it. Wouldn't it be amazing if we found 10 more kids of color that could see the magic of a spinning baton? I mean, we all found it. So I just want to thank all of you for being part of this tonight. And I am giddy excited that I was able to have so many smart people join this discussion, and I want it to go further. So let's expand our reach, and let's call to action. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.